Hi, I'm author Nancy Flinchbaugh, and I want to welcome you to the Writing for Change podcast, on which I interview my guests who are also writing for change. Today, I'm very happy to be interviewing Leah Rampy. Leah reweaves earth and soul on the edge of loss, and we will be discussing her new book, Earth and Soul Reconnecting Amid Climate Chaos. Leah is a writer, speaker, retreat leader, educator, and much more. She weaves ecology, spirituality, personal stories, and practices to help others deepen their relationship to the natural world. I think you will really enjoy meeting Leah and hearing about her amazing work. Well, welcome, Leah Rampy. Thank you for joining me today to talk about your work with Earth and Soul. And I wanted to just ask you to begin with, tell me a little bit about yourself and what motivated you to begin writing at this point
Uh,
in time.
yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Nancy. And I really appreciate what you're doing. And I love the whole idea of writing for change and what that means. So thanks for letting me join you. Yeah, so a little about myself. I've had a lot of different careers from teaching to working in the corporate world, mostly running training and development departments, executive coach, leadership development as an entrepreneur. And then where you and I met, I worked for Shalem Institute for Spiritual Formation for 6 years as the executive director. And what I do now is mostly lead retreats. I also do a once a month Church of the Wild offering that I lead. We're going on 5 years now, and do some writing. So that's a little bit about me. I live in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, married, active with a local community group called Save Our Soil, and live in a co-housing community here. So that's the background. I
Okay.
got interested in, I will add a little about climate. I was really interested for the last few decades in climate change and concerned and wondering what I could do about it. So in 2013, my daughter and I went to Chicago to be trained by former Vice President Al Gore in his climate reality presentation. That was the slideshow that he did during his movie An Inconvenient Truth, updated, of course. So we were going around doing that, and it became really clear to me that there was more to be discovered about why people weren't really engaged more fully in trying to make a difference. And so that's also a bit of my background.
I can actually remember when you went to that training because my
Do
husband
you? Yeah.
had gone to the training around the same time, and he came home, and you, maybe you were still at Shalem then. Yeah, I think. Anyway,
Yeah, it could well be. Yeah, no, I was at Chile when I went. It was in 2013 that we
yeah, and
went.
I
Yeah.
just remember, and then how that was, oh, that's really important to Leah too, and we were very concerned about that. And then
Uh-huh.
I've kind of watched, as you were doing different things, and then your book arrived, Earth and Soul, Reconnecting Amid Climate Chaos. And I just finished reading that, and it's like, wow, you've come a long way. And I could tell you've been struggling with climate and what is yours to do and how that fits into your contemplative life and
Right.
how it fits into all of our lives. So just tell me a little bit about how that book evolved, I guess. So 2013, you went through the training, and then this kind of gradually maybe grew out of that.
Yeah, I think that was part of it. While I was still living in the DC area, I got connected to a group called Biodiversity for a Livable Climate, and really became aware of all of the challenges of ecosystem loss, species loss. So there was this piece that had to do with, CO2 and the warming of the world and all of the, the detrimental effects of that, from melting ice, rising oceans, increased storms, droughts, floods. We can go on with that, because we know we've really changed the world significantly from the time that we were young. And then I became more aware of the loss of forests and species and full-on ecosystems, and the incredible impact that was making to lose all of these beautiful, wonderful, wild places. So that sort of started weaving in. And as I was doing retreats, I just found myself more and more called to invite people into practices that would help them connect more deeply. And I kept saying, love more, love the earth more. So that was another sort of phase of evolution. And I moved to writing when I finally got clear about what I wanted to say. And that's what led to writing Earth and Soul. It wasn't so much that I always wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
It was really more that I finally figured out what was important to me. And because I also wanted to struggle with it a little more, gosh, Nancy, because you write, there's something when you have to put it on paper that helps you clarify what it is you're really feeling or sensing or thinking. And you, for me anyway, I sure got clear on what I didn't know and needed to spend more time with too.
Yeah, well, I think you wove that into the book, your personal life experiences, grappling with climate change, which is something we're all facing, and then you kind of gave a lot of, encouraged us to have spiritual practices to deal with this, as well as figure out what is ours to do. So maybe we can talk about some of those things. Um, yeah, so I like, well, maybe what would you say are some spiritual practices that you would advocate for those of us who are dealing with the grief and the change that we're experiencing here with the planet?
Yeah. Well, it's such a great question. So let me just back up 1 second and say that I'm kind of seeing this as practices that are both inward and outward. And the way that I think of the outward practices is they are about connecting more deeply, more fully with the world around us. We live in a culture that teaches us, and by that I mean the dominant Western culture, which is certainly not true of everybody, but many of us live in that culture that teaches us that Earth is other, nature is other than we humans are. And I think that not only leads to, a lot of hubris, it leads us to deep loneliness. Like, we're lonely for connections to the living earth, and we don't even realize it. So I think there are certain practices that invite us to reconnecting. And, they start with basically with our senses, uh, gazing, listening, more deeply, opening to the sense of smell and touch. And even while we're eating, the sense of taste, that awareness that we are eating the natural world. So those are very basic, and they require us to slow down, to drop from head to heart. They're a much more expansive kind of space from which to come. So the practices for those are always, I think, about slowing down, being aware, connecting, listening.
I love that phrase, making sense of the world.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Um, there's a quote that is often attributed to Yeats: "The world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for our senses to sharpen." And so I feel like that's true no matter who said it. Um,
I
it's
mean, I
one of
think
those, when
that's
you try to trace the attribution, you can't find it. But yeah.
I think he said go outside and just find a really small area and just think about all the life that's evolving in that. And I was out walking in my backyard this morning, and the irises have just broken open. They're beautiful. I have these beautiful
Yeah.
irises, and it's
Yeah.
magic that the incredible ability of a perennial bulb to continue to flower it's just miraculous.
Yeah.
And then right
Yeah.
beside the irises are my peony bushes, and the little ants were crawling on the bulb of the peony. And I've heard that the ants are even important for the peonies to open.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so many things going on
Right.
in nature.
Right.
I know I'm
Yeah.
ignorant of so much, but I love that part, calling us
Yeah.
into deeper connection. And you said not just connection, but communion,
Hmm.
the earth.
Well, and noticing too the connections that are already there, like the ants and the peonies, right? I mean, that there's something that is going on there to pay attention to. And whether we understand it scientifically or not, we can still be amazed by those kinds of interactions. So that's kind of the outward piece. And then, the inward piece has to do with that journey to heart and soul, the openness, the spaciousness to listen for that wisdom, capital W, deep within those, the essence, the true sense of who we are and who we're called to be. I think discernment is a practice that, is invited for that inward journey. But I want to be careful because they belong together, and I'm doing that weaving, it's not that we can just set and do the inward journey, and it's not that we can do the outward journey. They lead us to do both. Um, I think in going out into the living world, we become more deeply attuned uh, to ourselves, and in becoming more deeply attuned to the essence of our soul, we are more open and available to that living world. So it's woven together. It's
Mhm.
not an either or journey.
Yeah, I remember when Elizabeth O'Connor came out with that book years ago, Journey Inward, Journey Outward,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of talking about our inward journey as it relates to our outward journey. But this is taking it to a new level, I think, in terms of the connectedness,
Yeah.
the web that we're a part of.
Yeah. I want to go back because you mentioned grief, and I think that's a really important one, because as we become more in tune to and with and respect more deeply and maybe love the living world around us, we will be subjected to grief. And that is difficult. And we will be, because the world is changing. We have changed it. And because that's also part of the natural cycle, right? So I can understand, I'm really sympathetic to why we might want to sort of shut down and not connect because of that fear of loss. When we dull ourselves to loss, we also dull ourselves to joy and beauty and wonder. And I think those live together. And that, I think, is what's so important as we bear witness to the losses and as we see and grieve for the many things that are no longer what they once were, for lands, for forests, for waters. Then I think we also need to be attentive to the beauty that is still around us and the beauty that is within the losses,
Mhm.
so that is what helps sustain us. We could think of that experience, as losing a beloved friend or family member, how we might set vigil. And, the loss is hard. And there is a beauty in being with that person and remembering the goodness and holding still conversations if that's possible. And I recognize it's not always, and I don't want to make it that those are always beautiful experiences. Simply to say that it's kind of like, how Mr. Rogers was look for the helpers.
Mhm.
When there's something really difficult, look to see who the helpers are. Well, that too, and look for the beauty. Where's the beauty? So that we can, you know, support our heart and soul when it's breaking.
I mean, I remember once when my dad was really, well, he was having some dementia. And my older brother got upset with me for talking about it. And I remember talking to a hospice nurse and she said, and I said, I think my brother's in denial. And she said, well, I never try to deny people their denial because
Mhm.
it's a
Yeah,
way people, deal with
yeah.
grief. But on the other hand, when we come to the grief we have for the earth, I do think there is a lot of denial, and I
Mhm.
don't know if we need to be midwives to help people express that grief. But we were doing worship for Earth Day at my church, and we have a creation justice team, and we had selected a hymn for special music called the All Creatures Lament.
Mm,
And I think there was some resistance in our group to do it. And then after we did it, one person told me she just did not like that in worship.
mm,
And we had
mhm,
other praise songs in the worship, but
mhm.
I just think there's a real resistance to, bringing that. I thought we need to bring the lament into our worship space. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think I saw maybe you during the retreat you were leading, or you were talking about how you put some things up on Facebook and you'll get all this activity, but then if you
Right,
put something up about your concern for the earth, it's almost silent, right?
right. Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
just something I deal with, wonder about, yeah, what to do about that.
yeah.
But I like,
Well,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
Well, if you
Yeah.
had something to say, I don't.
I was just going to say that, we can't all be, I mean, we understand. I think that's, the hospice worker was right that we have to be patient with people's denial to some degree. And we also know that we can't hold it all the time. That I imagine many of us say, like, I cannot keep watching the news anymore. Like, I'm going to watch to a point, I'm going to keep myself informed, and then I just have to have a break. I can't keep watching because I'm internalizing the sorrow or anger, frustration, whatever it is. And there's a point where then that's all I'm taking in. And so I do think we have to attend to that.
I like your,
And
oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I like your Mobius strip thing where you
Uh-huh.
write down on one side of a strip of paper everything you enjoy and love about the earth, and the other side, your grief, and then you connect it and you just realize how everything is
I,
interconnected.
pardon me. I've got one here. I'm ready for tomorrow, where I'm doing a class, and so I just colored one side yellow and the other's white. And so that if this is the joy, and this is the not joy, the sorrow, the pain, the loss, we can make that one last turn before we connect them. And then there is no end.
Yeah, so, well, I like your suggestions to hold the grief and the joy, I don't, I don't know. Um, Joanna Macy suggests writing a letter to yourself from the earth. And I started doing that several years ago. And that was one of the messages. After a while, well, the earth signed her letters Gaia, and after a while, I believe it was God that was writing me. But that was like overriding message that came, dance, enjoy, live in the moment. Don't savor the people, savor the food. In fact, in the first letter I got, guy said, I didn't evolve you into existence over 4.7 billion years to have you sit around like a lump on a log. This is a huge experiment. Take joy, and dance, and so it's just like that. I mean, it's a little presumptuous of myself to think that God or the earth is writing me letters, but that's been a really important thing to me, to joy. If we are in a hospice situation, what do you do if you have a short period of time left? You have to live every moment as fully as possible. So I really make that part of my everyday life, to try to live fully. Some people think I do too much, but I'm just trying to live my life as fully as I can, while at the same time doing what is mine to do. And I think that was the other thing you really stress in the book, that each of us need to find what is ours to do. How are we being called? And I think he said we need to take time and listen to the earth, spend time letting that evolve. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about that, how you personally did that, and how you would recommend that the rest of us do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, thank you for that question, Nancy. So I think, we've kind of gotten hooked on this. These are the 10 things you should do, or the 100 ways you can make a difference, or here's 7 important things you must do, or whatever. We sort of like those, in part because they feel more concrete, and they also seem to hold some promise and maybe something we haven't yet figured out. I'm not sure that it's that simple, and I certainly don't feel I could say to you what's important for you to do, because I don't know what your calling is. I do think that we have written within us gifts for this particular time that are important, and our discernment is, what are those gifts? Now, one thing I think that feeds into that discernment is listening within, and also that going outward, listening to earth. So if you have a daily walk, what seems to be asking you to help? What seems to be invited? We can have such good intentions about things we want to fix and try to move into fixing something, which, has this edge of human-centric kind of attitude that we are here to fix the earth. Earth has agency, earth has wisdom. We are to listen for what is wanting to unfold and match that to our gifts and our calling, and then join with others. I mean, I think it's so important to do this in community, and I mean that earth community, and particularly our friends and neighbors that we often think of when we say join with others, the people around us. So both and. I'm not suggesting that's an easy process, but I am suggesting that that's possible and leads to helping birth what's waiting to be born. So you mentioned the idea of being hospice workers, and I think that's right. We are to be hospice workers, and we are to be midwives. So what are we to help come to fruition? What's wanting to happen? So is that forest or those woods that are near you, are they looking for help? Do they just need some guardianship so that they're not being cut down? Do they need somebody to come in and weed out the garlic mustard or the multiflora rose? What is listening telling you about what's invited? And Some of us probably are invited to big things on the world stage. And many of us are probably invited to things that are very near home, plant a garden, give some food for the pollinators, save the dandelions for the bees in spring. There's myriads. There's myriads. That. I know you do. There's myriads of things that we can do when we are attentive, available, present to what's being invited. So you ask my own personal, I have a few neighbors that we started a little group called Save Our Soil. And we became really aware of the importance of soil health. And we support regenerative farming by raising awareness of those farms around us that are engaged in that practice. We support local food, both growing our own and buying locally. We try to do a good job of composting our food scraps so they're not into the landfill, and encouraging others to do that. And our big thing is to plant native plants for bees, insects, pollinators. And I live in a co-housing community, and so our yards are very small. So it's easy to give up all of our grass and just plant it all for food of some sort, food for us or food for the critters. And we give tours for people who want to know about that. And we do presentations for people who are curious about it. That feels like something I know how to do. And it's very close to home. And I have friends that I do it with, so we can support each other in that. So that's, that's an example of something that has a right feeling and feels that Earth loves that,
Yeah. Trying to go back to the way the earth would take care of itself in terms of the soil and the native plants, that support the wildlife and the ecosystem.
Well, that's Janine Benyus writes about, what would Earth do here? She has this concept called biomimicry. And that's kind of I didn't understand it the first time I heard it. I thought it was about, like, I don't know, trying to take from Earth. But she's really saying, how do we have Earth be a model for us and a teacher for us? And what are the incredible things that Earth is already doing? Like, if you want to know how to bring water back to the land, look to beavers. Don't look to like geoengineering first, look to beavers. They do that. They're crazy how they can go into a place that seemingly has no water anywhere, and all of a sudden they go to work and there are streams coming into fruition. So look to how Earth would solve these challenges, and what Earth would be wanting to have flourish in certain places.
We have a nature preserve down in Yellow Springs, a little south of us, and they have allowed the beavers to take over. And it's so amazing, and they, instead of stopping the beavers, which I think would be really tempting, because this is not a real huge area, with walking trails along a gorge. They're building walking paths over the marsh and the water areas, so you can see firsthand what the beavers are doing.
Yeah. Well, it's, that's that tension, isn't it? Because there's so many places like that but we want that land for another purpose, right? And so that requires a lot of thoughtful consideration,
Well, we've talked a little bit about some spiritual practices and then some actions that you're taking and encouraging people to find what's called within them. And I guess we've talked about that too. What change you're hoping for as you write the book is maybe for change within each of us. Is that what you would say for as to be changed.
Yes, yes. And I also wanted to give some encouragement to people who are working so hard in the environmental area and are not seeing the changes that they are really hoping for and working for. And I would say I want to give encouragement in two ways. And one of those is to um, to know that we do what we can do, and that it's okay to say that in our lifetimes we are not going to be able to do everything we would hope for, and that there is more than we can imagine that is being done by Earth. And Earth has miraculous ways to heal herself. That is not an invitation to do nothing. That is simply to say that there's an and there. We do what we can, and we plant the seeds we can plant. We may never live to see them harvested, but we are, I hope, laying stepping stones to a future where there is more a sense of mutual well-being and flourishing and less othering. And we are part of a huge history. You mentioned, the earth. And I think that's where the cosmic story is so important. If we remember, we're part of that 13.8 billion years. We are not this little hair on the timeline that we are is not the end of the story. That does not mean it's not important. It's very important that we do what we can and what we're called. And it's also important that we don't lose hope, because there's more that's possible beyond what we know or understand.
Yeah, hanging on to hope. I think that was a strong message too in your book, not to give up.
Yeah. Not the la la, because sometimes people use that term but I just hope that we'll do X and then we can just keep living the way we're living. That's not what I'm speaking about. Not a Disneyland kind of, a Disney World sense of hope, like it will all be, um, you know, beauty and balloons or something. Rather that active, hard-won hope, knowing that, we are doing everything that we believe we're called to do in collaboration with the living world, for the collective well-being of all.
Well, thank you for your work and for bringing this to us. I think my life has been enriched by reading your book and by listening to you and learning from you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, it's my privilege and honor to be a part of this conversation. So thank you for including me.
And you're working on some other things. Do you want to tell us about the next book that you may be completed by now?
It's at the editor's right now, and my co-author Beth Norcross and I are just kind of being really happy. We haven't heard anything, but then of course you wait a while and you're like, oh dear. But anyway, this book grew out of a class that Beth and I developed about 4 years ago and co-lead, called The Spiritual Wisdom of Trees. And we were approached by Broadleaf Books to make this into a book. And so we have been expanding upon and hopefully enriching the program that we were offering by writing more and more. And, I love trees. So this is a joy to be learning more and writing more. And it's been a joy to work with Beth. So that is off to the editor, and it has a publication date in the spring of 25. So
Yeah, and you mentioned briefly the Church of the Wild, and that's something you said you help lead once a month. can you just say a word about what the Church of the Wild?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yes, so this coming Sunday here, I don't know when this will be released, but our Sunday in May will be our 5-year anniversary for starting Church of the Wild. I started that because well, truthfully, I was looking for somebody else who I thought wanted to do it, and I reached out to them to say, I'd be happy to help you. And yeah, apparently that was not in their cards at all. And after kind of waiting for some signs like where that might be coming to fruition, I finally decided, oh, maybe that was that was supposed to be me who was supposed to start this. So there's a Wild Church network. There are wild churches all over the US and Canada for sure, maybe in other places. They are not they're not aligned at all in terms of the exact format or traditions that they use, but they have a common theme of inviting people into deeper spirituality in the living world. So that is what we do. We meet once a month. We have people from all denominations, no denomination, people who have a whole different sense of what may be important to them from a religious tradition perspective, but we are focused on spirituality in the living world and connecting more deeply to the land, the trees, the water around us. So we meet, we connect around a theme for a little bit, and then the sermon is a 40-minute walk, silent walk in nature. And then we come back together and talk a little bit about what we've noted and share out of that. And that's kind of the flow that we use every time. We might have a song, we might have a dance, somebody might bring a musical instrument, people bring their own gifts. But the important part is we're in this practice together of connecting, learning from, being with, being open to the world around us.
We're going to try a modified version of that at our church in June for the solstice. We're going to meet outdoors and by a natural area, and that's our for the sermon, to send people out to listen.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to say, you mentioned trying out some of the things in your congregation, like the song for songs of loss. I mean, I do think that we are missing not only some of the practices, but some of the rituals that might help us in these challenging times to hold grief, to mourn together. I mean, what's the ritual for the loss of a forest? What's the ritual for the loss of a mountaintop? I mean, those are really important things for us to create together. Because we need that kind of collaboration and support from each other.
To keep exploring and finding new ways, practices to help us live into these times.
Right.
Well, thank you again for talking with me today and for your good work. And I hope people will check out Earth and Soul. I think they'll find it's helpful to their soul as they live and learn from the earth in these times. So, thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Nancy.
Check out Leah Rampy online on her website at leahmoranrampy.com. And there you can subscribe to her newsletter to get notified of her upcoming events, book news, and her blog. I also encourage you to find and read Earth and Soul, Leah's book on reconnecting amid climate chaos. You can also look for her writings in these anthologies, Soul Food, the Cardinal Anthology, and the Anthology of Appalachian Writers. For more information about Leah's Church of the Wild, check out their website at churchofthewildtworivers.com. Also, you can find out more information about the organization Save Our Soil that she's involved with at saveoursoilwv.com. can follow Leah on Facebook at Leah Rampy Writer, on Instagram at Leah Rampy without a space, and on LinkedIn at Leah Rampy. Thank you for listening. I'm author Nancy Flinchbaugh. You can check out my website at nancyflinchbaugh.com for more information, or you'll also find links to the Writing for Change blog. Have a great day.